Hey everyone, welcome to NCRT Audiobook, Chapter 13 Organisms and Populations. Our living world is fascinating, diverse, and amazingly complex. We can try to understand its complexity by investigating processes at various levels of biological organization: micromolecules, cells, tissues, organs, individual organisms, population, communities, ecosystems, and biomes. At any level of biological organization, we can ask two types of questions. For example, when we hear the bulbul singing early morning in the garden, we may ask, how does the bird sing? Or why does the bird sing? The how type questions seek the mechanism behind the process, while the why type questions seek the significance of the process. For the first question in our example, the answer might be in terms of the operation of the voice box and the vibrating bone in the bird. Whereas for the second question, the answer may lie in the bird's need to communicate with its mate during breeding season. When you observe nature around you with a scientific frame of mind, you will certainly come up with many interesting questions of both types. Why are night blooming flowers generally white? How does the bee know which flower has nectar? Why does cactus have so many thorns? How does the chick spears recognize her own mother? And so on. You have already learned in previous classes that ecology is a subject which studies the interactions among organisms and between the organism and its physical abiotic environment. Ecology is basically concerned with four levels of biological organization: organisms, populations, communities, and biomes. In this chapter, we explore ecology at organismic and population levels. 13.1 Organism and its environment. Ecology at the organismic level is essentially physiological ecology, which tries to understand how different organisms are adapted to their environments in terms of not only survival but also reproduction. You may have learned in earlier classes how the rotation of our planet around the sun and the tilt of its axis cause annual variations in the intensity and duration of temperature, resulting in distinct seasons. These variations, together with annual variation in precipitation — remember precipitation includes both rain and snow — account for the formation of major biomes such as desert, rainforest, and tundra. Figure 13.1. Regional and local variations within each biome lead to the formation of a wide variety of habitats. Major biomes of India are shown in Figure 13.2. On planet Earth, life exists not just in a few favorable habitats but even in extreme and harsh habitats. Scorching Rajasthan desert, rain-soaked Meghalaya forest, deep ocean trenches, torrential streams, permafrost, snow-laden polar regions, high mountain tops, thermal springs, and stinking compost pits, to name a few. Even our intestine is a unique habitat for hundreds of species of microbes. What are the key elements that lead to so much variation in the physical and chemical conditions of different habitats? The most important ones are temperature, water, light, and soil. We must remember that the physico-chemical abiotic components alone do not characterize the habitat of an organism completely. The habitat includes biotic components also: pathogens, parasites, predators, and competitors of the organism with which they interact constantly. We assume that over a period of time, the organism had, through natural selection, evolved adaptations to optimize its survival and reproduction in its habitat. Each organism has an invariably defined range of conditions that it can tolerate, diversity in the resources it utilizes, and a distinct functional role in the ecological system. All these together comprise its niche. Major abiotic factors. Temperature. Temperature is the most important ecologically relevant environmental factor. You are aware that the average temperature on land varies seasonally, decreases progressively from the equator towards the poles and from plains to the mountain tops. It ranges from sub-zero levels in polar areas and high altitudes to greater than 50 degrees Celsius in tropical deserts in summer. There are, however, unique habitats such as thermal springs and deep-sea hydrothermal vents where average temperatures exceed 100 degrees Celsius. It is general knowledge that mango trees do not and cannot grow in temperate countries like Canada and Germany. Snow leopards are not found in Kerala forest, and tuna fish are rarely caught beyond tropical latitudes in the ocean. You can appreciate the significance of temperature to living organisms when you realize that it affects the kinetics of enzymes and through it the metabolic activity and other physiological functions of the organism. A few organisms can tolerate and thrive in a wide range of temperatures. They are called euthermal, but a vast majority of them are restricted to a narrow range of temperatures, such organisms are called stenothermal. The levels of thermal tolerance of different species determine to a large extent their geographical distribution. Can you think of a few euthermal and stenothermal animals and plants? In recent years, there has been a growing concern about the gradually increasing average global temperatures. If this trend continues, would you expect the distribution range of some species to be affected? Water. Water is another the most important factor influencing the life of organisms. In fact, life on Earth originated in water and is unsustainable without water. Its availability is so limited in deserts that only special adaptations make it possible for organisms to live there. The productivity and distribution of plants is also heavily dependent on water. You might think that organisms living in oceans, lakes, and rivers should not face any water related problems, but it is not true. For aquatic organisms, the quality, chemical composition, pH of water becomes important. The salt concentration, measured as salinity in parts per thousand, is less than 5 in inland waters, 30 to 35 in the sea, and greater than 100 in some hypersaline lagoons. Some organisms are tolerant of a wide range of salinities, euryhaline, but others are restricted to a narrow range, stenohaline. Many freshwater animals cannot live for long in seawater and vice versa because of the osmotic problems they would face. Light. Since plants produce food through photosynthesis, a process which is only possible when sunlight is available as a source of energy, we can quickly understand the importance of light for living organisms, particularly autotrophs. Many species of small plants, herbs, and shrubs growing in forests are adapted to photosynthesize optimally under very low light conditions because they are constantly overshadowed by tall canopy trees. Many plants are also dependent on sunlight to meet their photoperiodic requirement for flowering. For many animals too, light is important in that they use the diurnal and seasonal variations in light intensity and duration photoperiod as cues for timing their foraging, reproductive, and migratory activities. The availability of light on land is closely linked with that of temperature since the sun is the source for both. But deep greater than 500 meters in the ocean, the environment is dark and its inhabitants are not aware of the existence of a celestial source of energy called sun. What then is their source of energy? The spectral quality of solar radiation is also important for life. The UV component of the spectrum is harmful to many organisms while not all the color components of the visible spectrum are available for marine plants living at different depths of the ocean. Among the red, green, and brown algae that inhabit the sea, which is likely to be found in the deepest waters, and why? Soil. The nature and properties of soil in different places vary. It is dependent on the plant, the weathering process, whether soil is transported or sedimentary, and how soil development occurred. Various characteristics of the soil, such as soil composition, grain size, and aggregation, determine the percolation and water holding capacity of the soils. These characteristics, along with parameters such as pH, mineral composition, and topography, determine to a large extent the vegetation in any area. This in turn dictates the type of animals that can be supported similarly. In the aquatic environment, the sediment characteristics often determine the type of benthic animals that can thrive there. 13.1.2 responds to abiotic factors. Having realized that the abiotic conditions of many habitats may vary drastically in time, we now ask how do the organisms living in such habitats cope or manage with the stressful conditions? But before attempting to answer this question, we should perhaps ask first why a highly variable external environment should bother organisms after all. One would expect that during the course of millions of years of their existence, many species would have evolved a relatively constant internal within the body environment that permits all biochemical reactions and physiological functions to proceed with maximum efficiency and thus enhance the overall fitness of the species. This constancy, for example, would be in terms of optimal temperature and osmotic concentration of body fluids. Ideally, then, the organism should try to maintain the constancy of its internal environment, a process called homeostasis. Despite varying external environment conditions that tend to upset its homeostasis, let us take an analogy to clarify this important concept. Suppose a person is able to perform his or her best when the temperature is 25 degrees Celsius and wishes to maintain it so even when it is scorchingly hot or freezingly cold outside. It could be achieved at home, in the car, while traveling, and at workplace by using an air conditioner in summer and heater in winter. Then his or her performance should be always maximal regardless of the weather around him or her. Here the person's homeostasis is accomplished not through physiological but artificial means. How do other living organisms cope with the situation? Let us look at various possibilities. 1. Regulate. Some organisms are able to maintain homeostasis by physiological, sometimes behavior also, means which ensures constant body temperature, constant osmotic concentration, etc. All birds and mammals and a very few lower vertebrate and invertebrate species are indeed capable of such regulation, thermoregulation and osmoregulation. Evolutionary biologists believe that the success of mammals is largely due to their ability to maintain a constant body temperature and thrive whether they live in Antarctica or in the Sahara Desert. The mechanisms used by most mammals to regulate their body temperature are similar to the ones that we humans use. We maintain a constant body temperature of 37 degrees Celsius. In summer, when outside temperature is more than our body temperature, we sweat profusely. The resulting evaporative cooling, similar to what happens with a desert cooler in operation, brings down the body temperature. In winter, when the temperature is much lower than 37 degrees Celsius, we start to shiver, a kind of exercise which produces heat and raises the body temperature. Plants, on the other hand, do not have such mechanisms to maintain internal temperatures. Conform. An overwhelming majority, 99% of animals and nearly all plants cannot maintain a constant internal environment. Their body temperature changes with the ambient temperature. In aquatic animals, the osmotic concentration of the body fluids change with that of the ambient air water osmotic concentration. These animals and plants are simply conformers. Considering the benefits of a constant internal environment to the organism, we must ask why these conformers had not evolved to become regulators. Recall the human analogy we used above, much as the like, how many people can really afford an air conditioner? Many simply sweat it out and resign themselves to suboptimal performance in hot summer months. Thermoregulation is energetically expensive for many organisms. This is particularly true for small animals like shrews and hummingbirds. Heat loss or heat gain is a function of surface area. Since small animals have a larger surface area relative to their volume, they tend to lose body heat very fast when it is cold outside. Then they have to expend much energy to generate body heat through metabolism. This is the main reason why very small animals are rarely found in polar regions. During the course of evolution, the cost and benefits of maintaining a constant internal environment are taken into consideration. Some species have evolved the ability to regulate, but only over a limited range of environmental conditions, beyond which they simply conform. If the stressful external conditions are localized or remain only for a short duration, the organism has two other alternatives for survival. Migrate. The organism can move away temporarily from the stressful habitat to a more hospitable area and return when the stressful period is over. In human analogy, this strategy is like a person moving from Delhi to Shimla for the duration of summer. Many animals, particularly birds, during winter undertake long distance migrations to more hospitable areas. Every winter, the famous Kilado National Park, Bharatpur, in Rajasthan hosts thousands of migratory birds coming from Siberia and other extremely cold northern regions. 4. Suspend. In bacteria, fungi, and lower plants, various kinds of thick-walled spores are formed which help them to survive unfavorable conditions. These germinate on availability of suitable environment. In higher plants, seeds and some other vegetative reproductive structures serve as means to tide over periods of stress besides helping in dispersal. They germinate to form new plants under favorable moisture and temperature conditions. They do so by reducing their metabolic activity and going into a state of dormancy. In animals, the organism, if unable to migrate, might avoid the stress by escaping in time. The familiar case of bears going into hibernation during winter is an example of escape in time. Some snails and fish go into estivation to avoid summer-related problems, heat and desiccation. Under unfavorable conditions, many zooplankton species in lakes and ponds are known to enter diapause, a stage of suspended development. 13.1.3 Adaptations. While considering the various alternatives available to organisms for coping with extremes in their environment, we have seen that some are able to respond through certain physiological adjustments, while others do so behaviorally, migrating temporarily to a less stressful habitat. These responses are also actually their adaptations. So we can say that adaptation is any attribute of the organism, morphological, physiological behavior that enables the organism to survive and reproduce in its habitat. Many adaptations have evolved over long evolutionary time and are genetically fixed. In the absence of an external source of water, the kangaroo rat in North American deserts is capable of meeting all its water requirements through its internal fat oxidation, in which water is a byproduct. It also has the ability to concentrate its urine so that minimal volume of water is used to remove excretory products. Many desert plants have a thick cuticle on their leaf surfaces and have their stomata arranged in deep pits sunken to minimize water loss through transpiration. They also have a special photosynthetic pathway CAM that enables their stomata to remain closed during daytime. Some desert plants like Opuntia have no leaves. They are reduced to spines and the photosynthetic function is taken over by the flattened stems. Mammals from colder climates generally have shorter ears and limbs to minimize heat loss. This is called Allen's rule. In the polar seas, aquatic animals like seals have a thick layer of fat blubber below their skin that acts as an insulator and reduces loss of body heat. Some organisms possess adaptations that are physiological, which allow them to respond quickly to a stressful situation. If you had ever been to any high altitude place greater than 3500 meter Rotang Pass near Manali and Leh, you must have experienced what is called altitude sickness. Its symptoms include nausea, fatigue, and heart palpitations. This is because in the low atmospheric pressure of high altitudes, the body does not get enough oxygen, but gradually you get acclimatized and stop experiences altitude sickness. How did your body solve this problem? The body compensates low oxygen availability by increasing red blood cell production, decreasing the binding affinity of hemoglobin, and by increasing birth rate. Many tribes live in the high altitude of Himalayas. Find out if they normally have a higher red blood cell count or total hemoglobin than people living in the plains. In most animals, the metabolic reactions and hence all the physiological functions proceed optimally in a narrow temperature range. In humans, it is 37 degrees Celsius. But there are microbes, archaebacteria, that flourish in hot springs and deep sea hydrothermal vents where temperature far exceeds 100 degrees Celsius. How is this possible? Many fish thrive in Antarctic waters where the temperature is always below zero. How do they manage to prevent their body fluids from freezing? A large variety of marine invertebrates and fish live at great depths in the ocean where the pressure could be greater than 100 times the normal atmospheric pressure that we experience. How do they live under such high pressures and do they have any special enzymes? Organisms living in such extreme environments show a fascinating array of biochemical adaptations. Some organisms show behavioral responses to cope up with variations in their environment. Desert lizards lack the physiological ability that mammals have to deal with the high temperatures of their habitat, but manage to keep their body temperature fairly constant by behavioral means. They bask in sun and absorb heat when their body temperature drops below the comfort zone, but move into shade when the ambient temperature starts increasing. Some species are capable of burrowing into the soil to hide and escape from the above ground heat. अभी के लिए इतना ही रहने देते हैं. नेक्स्ट वीडियो में पॉपुलेशन से स्टार्ट करेंगे. अगर वीडियो अच्छी लगे तो प्लीज़ सब्सक्राइब करें. थैंक यू.